أعوذ بالله العلي العظيم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. People are coming in. It all right. How's everybody doing? All right. Okie dokie. Here we are, session 25, the one before the last session of our slow reading the wisdom of the throne. Everybody hear me fine? Just nod if you do. All right, all good. Okay. Let me just have a little sip of this water. And away we go. Number 14. Principle on the inner meaning of Tuba. He says, those who have true faith and do good work, for them is blessedness, Tuba, and a beautiful return. From Quran 13:29. Tuba is an image of the tree of knowledge with its many limbs and branches and the divine insights and inner truths that are its noble fruits and products. Let's let in Vanessa. We read that sentence again. Tuba is an image of the tree of knowledge with its many limbs and branches and the divine insights and inner truths that are its noble fruits and products, and that cannot be acquired by our mere mortal intellects alone. Rather, in order actually to attain and comprehend these divine insights and inner truths, it is necessary to take over lights from the lamp niche of the seal of prophecy, that is the noetic reality of Muhammad, or the Haqiqa Muhammadiyah, which is another way of saying the nous, or universal intellect, through the intermediary of the first of his heirs, that is Imam Ali alayhi salam, the noblest of his friends and disciples, and the most eminent of the gates to the city of his knowledge, in reference to the famous hadith, Ana Madinatul Ilm wa Ali Babuha. For it is only through the seeds of sainthood and discipleship and the tree of right guidance that these divine sciences and spiritual insights can unfold and expand in the hearts of those who are prepared and ready to receive their guidance. And as a note to this, I will say this to people. I have, over the years, from the time that my own teacher first introduced me to it, the Hadith al-Haqiqa, the Hadith Kumail, that people have seen me quote endlessly, that gave me the key to understanding the Quran and even the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad better than anything else on its Gnostic esoteric level. So for me, this statement of Mulla Sadra is almost literal. You know, once I took on the Hadith Kumail and internalized it and years meditating on it, it like literally gave me the key to everything. And that is obviously a statement of Ali, or the dialogue of Ali and Kumail. And, you know, I will give this readily to anybody, that if you meditate on this dialogue between Ali and Kumail, it opens doors unlike anything else on a noetic level. But let's go on. Among the reports supporting this interpretation is the following one, related by the most accurate, reliable, exact, and discerning of traditionalists, the Sheikh al-Saduq Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Ali al-Hussein ibn Bawai al-Qummi, on a sound line of authority going back to Abu Basir. The Imam, Abu Abdullah Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, said, Tuba is a tree in paradise. Its roots are in the house of the first Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, may peace be with him, and one of its branches is in the abode of every man of true faith. This is because Ali's most noble soul is a source of all virtues and knowledge, and his luminous heart is the key to the doors of the treasuries of divine inner knowledge handed down from the prophets, and especially from the last and wisest of them, Muhammad, may the best and highest of blessings be upon him and his family, as is clearly expressed in his saying, I am the city of knowledge, and Ali is its gates. Ana Madinatul Ilm wa Ali Babuha. Now, The only reason that this meaning of Tuba in the tradition just cited was specifically ascribed to the abode of Ali's inner spiritual heart in the other world, rather than to the abode of Muhammad, may God's blessing and peace be with him, was because it is only through Ali's teaching and explanation that one can acquire the particular details and specifics of those true forms of knowledge, which the messenger and the book brought as a general totality. And if you know your Henry Corbin, this is where Mulla Sadra is indicating the cycle of the Tanzil, the revelation being embodied in the Prophet, and the cycle of the Ta'wil, its esoteric return or return to source, reversion to source in the Walaya or the providential guidance of the Imams. This complementary role of Ali and the Imamate in relation to the Prophet was alluded to by him, may he be exalted, and is saying, say, God and he who has knowledge of the book is sufficient as a witness between me and you. And it's saying, certainly he is with us in the mother of the book, sublime, Ali, truly wise, al-Hakim. And is saying, so ask the people of remembrance if you do not know. And is saying, you, Muhammad, are only a warner, Nadir, and for every people there's a guide, al-Hadi. And because of that, it is reported that Muhammad, may God's blessing and peace be with him, said, since this verse was revealed, O Ali, I am the warner and you are the guide. So it should be clear by the light of the intellect and tradition, like the image of the tree, Tuba, by which I mean the source of all knowledge and true inner understanding, is indeed in the abode of Ali and his immaculate offspring, the other Imams, who are descendants of one another, since each of them follows in the footsteps of his sanctified father and his immaculate luminous forefather. And the branches of Tuba are in the dwellings of the beasts, breasts of their partisans, and the homes of the hearts of their adherents, because out of their knowledge of the Prophet and his trusted heir, may peace be with them both, grow the ramifications and divisions of the rational sciences and the branches of legal understanding in the hearts of the learned men and legal experts, who are their followers and the supporters of the tradition until the day of the rising, Yawm al-Qiyamah. Thus, the relation of the master of disciples, that is Imam Ali, may peace be with him, to the learned men of this religious community, with regard to his inner spiritual fatherhood, is like the relation of Adam, upon him be peace, to individual mortal men, with regard to the paternity of their outer form. This is why the Prophet, may God's blessing and peace with him, said, O Ali, you and I are the two fathers of this community. The relation of the tree Tuba to all the trees of paradise is also like this. The true knower and realized seeker Ibn Arabi said in Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, the Meccan revelations, know that the relation of the tree Tuba to all the trees of paradise is like that of Adam to the offspring who appeared from him. For when God had planted Tuba and properly formed it with his hand, then he breathed into it from his spirit. In the same way, he exalted Adam above all the angels by forming him with both of his hands, and breathed into him his spirit, so that Adam received as a legacy the inspiration of the spirit. And he has the knowledge of the names because of his having been created with both of his hands. Now, when the truly real had taken care of planting the tree Tuba and breathing into it, then he adorned it with fruits that are beautiful, or ornaments and fine raiment, glorifying whoever may wear them. And we are its earth in which Tuba and its fruits grow and flower, just as he made everything that is on the earth an adornment for it. It should be evident from the words that the blessed tree Tuba refers to the sources of true inner knowledge and of virtuous traits of character, makarim al-akhlaq, which are an adornment to the souls receiving them, just as what is on earth is an adornment for it. Number 15, principle concerning the abiding in hell of its people. This is an extremely difficult question, one that has been the subject of dispute between those learned in the external forms of the law and religious tradition, and those whose knowing is based on experiential unveiling, and even among the people of unveiling themselves. The question is whether the torment of those in hell goes on forever and without end, or whether instead they will have a certain rest and felicity there in Jahannam, which is their abode of misery, when the period of their torment comes to its appointed end. Of course, everyone is agreed that the unbelievers do not leave hell, but rather are remaining there for an endless time. For both abodes of hell and paradise have their inhabitants. Indeed, both are filled up with them. Now, there are fundamental philosophic principles indicating that every existent thing has an inherent end toward which it moves. That the bodily powers, which are the sources of Jahannam for each man, are in fact limited, and that their constant constraint against this inherent movement toward perfection of a natural being does not last forever. So in the end, everything does eventually come back to the divine mercy, which embraces all things. But we also have fundamental principle indicating that the torments and sufferings of Jahannam do continue forever for its inhabitants, just as the felicities and blessings of paradise last forever for its people. However, the perpetuity appropriate to these two domains has quite a different meaning in either case. That is, the sufferings of the Jahannam of material being are an unavoidable aspect of the existence of individual men and other natural beings, but are perpetuated on that plane of being through successive members of the human species, while the timeless blessings of the paradise of noetic being are attainable only by human individuals through death to the body and to the illusion of identity with it. This is absolutely profound, because what he's saying is that he's affirming what Ibn Arabi told us in the Fusus al-Hikam, but simultaneously also affirming the exoteric notion of the perpetuity of hell, but by locating its perpetuity in this world. So the perpetuity of the material world establishes the perpetuity of hell, because this world is a prison, it is a Jahannam. But by the same token, it also then affirms Ibn Arabi's position that the denizens of hell, not hell itself, but the denizens of hell will find felicity. Okay? And Mulla Sadra is obviously locating this in the post-mortem state. Moreover, you know that the order and arrangement of this world cannot function properly without crude and rough souls and extremely hard and cruel arts. For if all of mankind were of the same lofty rank and flawless nature, with obedient and God-fearing hearts, then the proper ordering of this social world would be upset. Because the cultivation and civilization of this earthly abode cannot be maintained without severe rough souls like those of pharaohs and antichrists and cunning satanic souls. So in other words, there's a necessity, not so much a necessity, but an economy of sorts for the existence of the Donald Trumps and Elon Musk and Peter Thiels and all the other kind of rabble associated. As God said, according to one tradition, indeed, I made Adam's disobedience the cause of the cultivation and civilization of this world. So much for the original sin. And he, may he be exalted, said, already we have carried off to Jahannam a great many of the jinn and of mankind who had hearts with which they did not understand, eyes with which they did not see, and ears with which they paid no heed. These are like cattle, or rather, they're even more astray. They are the heedless ones. Likewise, he said, if we had wished, we could have brought each soul its right guidance. But my saying has been realized, surely I will fill Jahannam, hell, with jinn and men altogether. This is because if all souls were of a single rank, that would contradict divine wisdom and the general well-being, since it would mean leaving out all the other possible ranks of beings in the state of contingency, so that they would never emerge from potentiality into actuality. But that is contrary to the divine wisdom and providential ordering of things. Never mind that the world of creation is the plane for the manifestation of all the names and attributes of God, not just one or two. Rather, Every group of natural beings has by essence certain natural ends and proper places. These essential ends of things are what are fitting and appropriate for them and correspond to their essences. And since the being of each group is required by God's decree and specific determination, by his providential ordering and mercy, in the end of the matter, all things must arrive at their natural and essential ends. This is true even if something should hinder them from reaching those ends for a longer or shorter period of time. As he said, they aim at the unseen from a place far away, and something is set between them and what they desire. For God is manifesting himself through all of the names and all of the stations and levels of their descent. He is the merciful, the compassionate, and the benevolent. And he is the almighty, the compelling, the overwhelming, and the avenging. And this meaning is also in the tradition. If few people were not already sinning, God would have done away with you and brought in your stead another nation that was sinning. One of the unveilers, that is Ibn Arabi, said, God causes the people of paradise and of hell to enter into those abodes, the blessed according to his grace, and the people of hell according to his justice. They settle down there through their actions, and they abide there through their intentions. Now those in hell receive the pains of their punishment in proportion to the period during which they treated other things as God in this world. But when the period of their punishment is through, then they are given comfort in that abode, and they continue abiding there. Because if they were to enter paradise, they would suffer painfully over there, since it would not agree with their intrinsic nature and predisposition. This is, as we read in the Fusus al-Hikam, it's basically a reiteration of the same thing. For they actually take pleasure in what they have of the fires, bitter cold, stinging snakes, and scorpions, and all else that hell contains, just as the people of paradise take pleasure there in its light and its pavilions, and in kissing its beautiful luminous beings, because their natures require that. Don't you see that there are people whose natures are such that they are actually hurt by the perfume of roses, while they take pleasure in putrid things? Or that people with a naturally hot disposition find the odor of musk offensive? Thus, pleasures follow from harmony and agreement with the natural disposition, while pains come from the lack of such agreement. The author of the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, Ibn Arabi, explained this topic assiduously and went to the utmost lengths in discussing it in that book. And in the Fusus al-Hikam, the Bezels of Wisdom, he said, as for the people of hell, in the end they eventually attain a comfort, for after the ending of their period of punishment, the form of hellfire must become cool and safe for those who are in it. Now, as for myself and what I have learned from the studies and practical spiritual exercises to which I have devoted myself, it would appear that hell, that is the Jahannam of bodily existence, is not an abode of comfort. Rather, it is only a place of pain, suffering, and endless torment. Its pains are continuous and constantly renewed without ceasing, since in the realm of physical being, as often as their sins are well cooked, they are given new skins in exchange. So that is no place for rest and to tranquility, because its position in the other world is like the position of the world of generation and corruption in this world. And those were sections 14 and 15, with only 2 more sections left to the wisdom of the throne. And that was the reading for this time, and now the floor is open. Whoever wants to jump in, floor is yours. Go for it.
Hey, I'll go first. Salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So if I've been following the argument correctly, all of the exoteric statements about the condition of Jahannam are correct. There is an unending duration of Jahannam, but your condition within that Jahannam may shift after a certain duration where you've met your quota of pain and suffering. You may start to enjoy or at least suffer less in that condition.
Yeah, that's it.
And is that, in a sense, are you then, could it be said that you're participating in some shadowy way in the pleasures of paradise?
Yes, and that is the noetic that is the noetic craft, that is the noetic journey. So in a sense, every noetic attainment, whether through knowledge or otherwise, in a sense, is enjoying in that, that uh, Jannat al Irfan or Jannat al Ma'rifa, this is so subtle and yet it is so subversive simultaneously. I mean, Ibn Arabi suggests this is all from Ibn Arabi, but he goes through extreme lengths and pains to kind of conceal this very point that Mulla Sadra just said to us. So yes, we are, in a sense, in this particular world, we are in hell, right? But we are also, those of us who are actually moving or doing the wayfaring, the saluk, are also getting glimpses of that noetic paradise and its contents all the time. And those of us who are advancing really far into the path are realizing that even the fire of hell itself is a tajalli. And I mean, you open your Quran and the symbolism of fire is everywhere associated also with God simultaneously to hell. And this is what Mulla Sadra is playing on here very explicitly.
Yeah, so Jahannam and Jannah are states or conditions of existence. And to the extent that we participate in both here and now, we have the opportunity to transmute Jahannam into Jannah.
Exactly. Which then kind of
Fascinating.
turns around. See, the assumption usually is that if you come to these sorts of truths, you want to basically retreat and spend the rest of the time navel gazing and contemplating God. On the contrary, and as Ibn Arabi and Mullah Sadr both kind of underscore again and again throughout their writings, this actually now puts the centrality of agency of a person who fully comprehends this on a higher level, that they have to engage in the world. You are an agent of God, in essence, an alchemist of God. Yeah.
Right. No extreme asceticism or renunciation. Not necessary. Counterproductive, even. Fascinating. Thank you.
Sure thing. I mean, this then kind of elevates, which is what I'm working on right now, elevates the activist, the real activist, um, and activists with real agency and integrity. It elevates them to a much higher level than even contemporary political theory would allow. In essence, we're dealing with Kumal, complete humans in a sense, perfect humans. Whether these perfect humans get to realize the content of their struggle and activism is a complete separate conversation.
Right. And I think the times definitely call for more activism. I've noticed, though, in a lot of activist circles, people tend to burn out very easily. They get consumed by the passion that they very justly feel. And it seems to me that perhaps a grounding in a perspective like this could provide counterbalance to that.
Which is precisely what I'm working on right now. I mean, I'm bringing together a lot of ideas I've been kind of writing about and thinking about and struggling with for a long time, trying to bring this kind of perspective together alchemically with dialectical materialism, which is two completely almost polar opposite inconceivable positions, but it can be done. And if it can be done through Ibn Arabi and Mullah Sadra precisely because of the dynamic ontology that they present to us. So we can,
Right.
basically reconcile Marx with God, as the liberation theologian already did to some degree, but we can then now kick it up in a couple of notches. At what does that even mean? And that's basically what I'm in the process right now of hammering out theoretically.
Fascinating. Yeah, you're already engaged in the dialectical work. I see. I watch your posts. It's very cool.
It is intellectual alchemy. It's not easy because there's a lot of gaps. So, I've been thinking through these ideas for about 30 years, but there were certain things I just couldn't bring together at the time because I didn't know enough, or certain experiences were not there yet at a point where I could resolve these theoretically and intellectually, let alone spiritually for myself. Once
Right.
overcome these step by step, then you're in a position to start to write this stuff out. Yeah.
MashaAllah.
Anybody else?
I'll go if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam.
What was I going to say? I had like three questions in my head now. One of them slipped away, so I'll ask one of the other ones. It's maybe a bit practical. So, as somebody who's a bit unfamiliar with the Shia tradition, he seems to refer to specific works attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam. I was wondering what those works were called.
Well, the compendiums of these works occur in several different places. I mean, most notably, obviously, the Nahj al-Balagha, the Peak of Eloquence, which are the discourses of Ali that were brought together under a single cover. There's a lot of questions whether some of this material is attributable to Ali because the version that we got from Sharif al-Murtaza, one of the students of the Sheikh al-Mufid, there's a lot of bias in that because these guys were really scandalized by the very esoteric material in early Shia collections. And so they, instead of creating a kind of ethical kind of text of the kind of stuff that we have in earlier compilations attributed to Ali, make most of this stuff very ethically oriented. But nevertheless, that's one. Then the various hadith collections of the Shia, beginning with Kulaini, the Usul min al-Kafi. And then there is a collection of poetry that is attributed to Ali called the Diwan of Ali, although there's been debates about the authenticity of this for a long time. But most Shia accept it as authentic. And some of this poetry is awesome. And then addition, it's kind of an addendum to the Diwan Ali. There's the Quran al-Fara'id, which is another kind of a poetic, ethical compilations of the sayings of Ali. So these are basically what we have, together with then the hadith collections and whatnot that talk about fiqh and other issues. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess another thing that occurred to me. So within the traditions of the Imams, there's also this, I guess, there are periods of quietism, right? If I'm correct about that, I wonder how that squares with your own, I guess, I kind of want to call it liberation theology. I'm not sure if that's the word you'd use, but
Liberation theosophy, I'm coining. That's
theosophy, okay.
Kicking it beyond just mere theology. Here's where you can reconcile this. During the period, especially after Imam Hussein, from Zayn al-Abidin all the way to Imam Hassan al-Askari, alayhim salam, the Imams were constantly under the thumb and surveillance and oppression of whether the Umayyads and then after them the Abbasids. And so in the literal outward expression of some of the things that they say, especially in the Imami collection, they kind of frame things in a kind of a quietist, politically correct kind of way. But we know, as they said themselves, that they were practicing the discipline of the arcane or taqiyya, right? So then they practice something that is known as the dispersal of knowledge. So for example, in one particular hadith, one of the imams may be talking about an issue of fiqh, but is raising a theological issue. And then somewhere else in a theological question, he begins to resolve the issue of fiqh through a theological lens, right? And there are a multiplicity of these sorts of examples throughout the Imami corpus of writings. And this all has to do with the persecution that they were facing under the Umayyads and then the Abbasids. So this is how you explain that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I feel like that's very similar to where we're at today with certain issues. You can't tackle things directly, but thankfully there's always a way.
Well, I think we should tackle things directly. I think, in fact, the age of taqiyya needs to end, even by people who don't know that they're practicing it on an intellectual level. Yes, certain things cannot be expressed in certain ways. Because there won't be a reception for them. People don't understand it. The contexts are too deep for people to comprehend it all at once. So you have to kind of drip feed it. But in other matters, I think that we should be very honest and upfront about what it is that we want to do. Because the ruling classes are already lying to all of us. So there has to be a kind of a counter narrative to that. So while they lie to us, somebody must be telling the truth to us.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Anybody else? Everybody's zoning out into samadhi. Hassan, Vanessa, anybody else? Hussein?
Could you clarify something for me?
Certainly.
I mean, there's a lot I can say on the topic of hell, but I feel like it's a big can of worms that
So,
I open up when we talk about. So,
well, I'll start here.
so
I mean, there's a pithy saying that hell is other people.
yeah, sure.
I mean, but also by the same token, paradise can be other people as well,
Yeah, everything can be heaven or hell, the world. Yeah, so in just what the sort of more orthodox versus if there's any sort of variants, different schools of thought on hell, like the duration of time in hell. My understanding, sometimes I got the impression that in Islam, hell is not eternal, but then I've read the opposite, that it is eternal. So, yeah, that's
with
what I'm looking
everything,
for clarification on.
there are as many opinions about this as there have been scholars and people who have written about it.
Okay, cool. Great.
The Quranic perspective is quite interesting because it can be read in a multiplicity of different ways. I mean, sometimes it does say it is eternal, but then at other times it kind of stops short of saying it is eternal. The word eternity, however, is used incessantly for those the denizens of paradise, that they will inhabit gardens underneath which rivers flow khalidin fiha, eternally under it, right? So the people of paradise don't go into hell once they're in paradise. They're in a state of eternal felicity. But with hell, sometimes there's a suggestion that it might be forever. At other times, it stops short of saying it is a ceaseless, an eternal state. Because in the Quran, this is the difference, I think, between the Christian notion of salvation and the Islamic one. In the Islamic one, Allah subhanahu is constantly offering a way out for people out of their sinful natures and actions, rather praxis, sinful praxis, rather than sinful nature, right? So if you've done X, Y, and Z and you do genuine Tawbah, God's hands are open, welcomes you with open arms into the realm of the saved. Whereas in Christianity, it appears that if an infraction is made, and usually on an ideological level, then God is not forgiving at all and casts those people into hell. And this is the very important point in the Quran. Non-Muslims are saved, right? So Christians, Jews, people of the book are saved, right? So they're not necessarily beholden to saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. As long as they are righteous and do good works, treat others as themselves, they are saved.
Yeah, judged by deeds. But there seems to be a certain subsection of hardliners that think if you don't accept Islam, that you will just sort of default to hell.
Yeah, but their perspective, especially as those of them who were following the kind of Ibn Taymiyyah perspective, and also some Shias as well, you get this with as well. Their perspectives are self-derived. These are part of a very narrow tradition of interpretation that can be very easily challenged, and is very easily challenged, usually. This is also precisely the reason why these sorts of very narrow-minded movements, whether you're talking Wahhabis, Salafis, or on the Shia side with like Maktab Tafkik or similar, they are fleeing these sorts of ideas from Mulla Sadra, Ibn Arabi, and similar, right? Because they approach religion from the point of view of a sectarian identity. Whereas what Ibn Arabi, Mulla Sadra and their school are doing are literally breaking identity. Because identity is a veil. It's an existential veil, right? So if you take your Islam as a sectarian identity from the point of view of Ibn Arabi and Mulla Sadra and their school, you have placed yourself in hell, whatever the content of your belief actually be.
I mean, you can see it as true in a way, like what one interpretation is that it's punitive, which is a kind of, childish understanding, but the other might be that if you don't cultivate that relationship with God, you'll fall into a disconnected state, which isn't necessarily, because God is punishing you from a place of anger,
Well, I mean,
so yeah, and I think I assume that would be utilized depending on how righteous someone wants to be with it,
well,
how sectarian.
Here's the thing. The thing is that exoteric religion as a whole, right? Doesn't matter what its form is cultivating narratives. It's not cultivating a relationship with God. It claims to sometimes, but it is not really cultivating a relationship with the true living spirit at this very moment. Its way is through a specific lens of a narrative of that, thinking that it is attaining salvation through it, but it is not. Whereas the living spirit is everything. It is right here at this moment as everything around you, in you specifically more than anywhere else, right? So they're saying cultivate that relationship. It's, that is the thing that is closer to you than your jugular vein, rather than the stories about what this God deity or whatever the institution's embodying. It's, thinking they're embodying its will. Think it is.
Do you think that's the transcendence is more of a higher order need versus just the immediate survival, and that we all agree on values and social order, etc.?
Yeah, but transcendence can also appear in the form of an immanence that erases the delusions that people cling onto as ideas, stories, and narratives about what it is. It's so transcendence is not just mere distance. It also has a purifying function and reality simultaneously.
Well, yeah, I mean, it can go either way. That we all have a group identity. We agree on our values. We have social order and protection of the innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And that has easily crossed over into we become dogmatic and rigid, and we want to eliminate the people who are not conforming with that. I think they're both driven. I think that it is driven from a place of mercy.
Sure.
If we understand it that way, not to see it as necessarily.
Sure, but you could also, we don't have to even venture into the world of religious creeds. We can look at interpersonal relationships or family dynamics, right? You have an individual who sees, for example, the toxic, dysfunctional family dynamic and calls it out. What happens? The collective unit of the family begins to scapegoat that person as the problem person, whereas the problem is in the group dynamic, the egregore of the family, the toxicity and dysfunction of that family behavioral dynamic, right? So right there, that individual who is calling it out has transcended that egregore, that paradigm, that toxic paradigm.
They have, and the more basic need. It's a good example actually, because the more base need is that loyalty to the family as a survival unit, multiplied by many times, is what's keeping the species going.
Yeah.
So they're
But
both merciful.
yeah, but it is toxic at the same time, and it is
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, I'm saying it can descend into that toxicity where people can't then vary from that, because of exactly what we're saying, that there's the loyalty to the narratives and to the hierarchies that we agree on to get through can become entrenched, and then there's no room for challenge or movement or things changing in real time. It's like the difference between trying to enforce something exactly from 1,000 years ago
yeah.
versus considering the current environment.
Yeah. And that's why, especially amongst Muslims, they don't seem to pay very much attention to the verse, "Kullu yawmin huwa fi shanin." Every day it is upon some new task. So while they've ossified themselves in the time of Ibn Taymiyyah or whatever, they don't look at it that, what Ibn Taymiyyah or similar thought about a specific issue 1,000 years ago has almost zero, I say almost, not completely, but almost zero relevance to this moment. And so what it is, it becomes a compound delusion. They wrap themselves in a compound delusion about it, about a particular situation and how they should respond to it.
Mm.
Just like a toxic family dynamic. They always respond in the same way about certain situations.
Do you think, though, that cannot be abused by our lazy natures to just say, well, it's all just whatever, and let's just drop let's just drop anything that requires discipline. It's like the people that just say their Sharia doesn't.
Well, I mean,
it's not relevant because it requires them to kill the party,
Sure.
or do something with effort.
There are extremes on, there are tendencies in both extreme ways. You can continue to engage with the delusion, that collective delusion, or you can then fall into the opposite antinomian kind of position that just says, to hell with it. But this doesn't resolve the problem. It just recreates a new problem, right? So the point is, this is why dialectical thinking is so important, because it seeks to resolve the contradictions between both. Marx got this idea from Hegel. He calls it the negation of the negation, right? Where you negate the toxicity of both extremes in order to create a new reality from the ashes of both. So neither the dysfunctional family dynamics nor the kind of hippie antinomian dynamic that just wants to walk away from all of it and do whatever it wants to do. It goes beyond the problems of both, because both of these are extremes.
Is there anyone that you feel in this sort of the Islamic greats that encapsulate that?
Yes, even
middle path. Yeah, I was going to say
school. Yes, 100%. Yes, this entire Gnostic esoteric tradition, in my opinion, has done that. At least with those of them who really not only engage in the ideas but live it.
Thank you.
Hassan, did you want to say anything?
Sidi, could you elaborate a little more?
Can you speak louder? I can barely hear you.
Okay. If you can elaborate a little more on the words of Sheikh Muhyiddin, that we are the earth from which the tree of Tuba grows.
God, I love that statement. Korban translated that part in Spiritual Body and Celestial Earth. Yes, we are the tree of the Tuba. Every human being is potentially the Insan Kamil, which is the Shajaratul Tuba. This is another one of the tropes that he uses throughout his works. So the Shajaratul Tuba, the tree of Tuba, is the Insan Kamil. But then he also then uses this in a plural that is not just talking about the singular greatest man or perfect human, that is easily to idealize, that his bezels of wisdom kind of writes about in 27 chapters, but also each person potentially is that tree, right? We lost Hassan. Waiting for IB Camp connection. All right, there you are. So each person is potentially that tree of paradise, right? And it's the thing that every human being should strive for. So every human was then that Tuba tree, and the earth upon which they live is made from the clay remaining from the creation of Adam. This is what he says in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah. Right? So take that symbolism and internalize it and live it. And how does that living occur? Through the practice, through the suluka ilallah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sayyidi. And
Speak up,
one
please.
more. Okay, excuse me. The other one related to Mulla Sadra, just I very much liked the way he presented the eternal hellfire, which exists through the species, the human species, the species as whole, generation after generation. And maybe one of the things, every time when their skin burns, we will give them another skin. I see that every time one human generation goes, another human generation will come, and so on.
Yes.
And in the same time that the paradise exists in the individual soul, which transcends to the heavenly,
Yes.
both philosophically and spiritually. Very beautiful explanation, personally for me.
This was one of the points that my interlocutor that I have talked about before, that I lent this book to for about a couple of months, came back very dismayed that Mulla Sadra was doing this with heaven and hell. He was saying Mulla Sadra psychologized all religion. This is disconcerting, because then what does it do to those people who get away with murder? And the answer to that is very simple. What does being wujud do to those who get away with murder, at least in the social recognition of it, is that these people live with that. And there is no psycho, sociopath, serial murderer, etc., that you could say is living in a paradise, living with their actions. These people, all of them, as long as they're human, are living with the consequences of their actions on their conscience. So they are in a perpetual hell of their own. And sooner or later, in some fashion, the law of karma catches up with them. My friend retorted, well, what about Stalin? And I said, well, what about Stalin? Let's look at Joseph Stalin's personal life. His children left it. One of his children he even sent to the gulag. The woman that he loved committed suicide. Everybody was afraid of him. The man had no life, right? He was a monster that all genuflected to throughout the 37-something years of his rule. He was not loved. How could any human being live that way without a deep wound at the center of their being, whatever power they might have in their hands? Very lonely existence. So yeah, what about Stalin or Hitler or whatever? All of these various dictators and mass murderers of history. They don't get away with what they're doing. We might not like the manner in which they're punished, or we might even not recognize the manner in which they are punishing themselves, but yet they're not escaping it.
So I guess the flip side to this question is, what of all the prophets who suffered anxiety through the, I guess, the exercise of their prophetic mission?
Very simple. That's what Quran refers to as the narullah mawquda, the enkindled fire. And that enkindled fire is emotional. It creates anxiety, right? It creates that fire of passion that emotionally is extremely destabilizing to anybody else. But that prophet figure can keep it because that's what is compelling him or her to speak. And that figure will, suffer the slings of and arrows of outrageous fortune again and again and again and again. But meanwhile, while they're suffering that on a some kind of a zahiri level, even on a very surface botany level, internally, there's an alchemical process so that you can say that their heart of such a person is like an ethanol of the alchemical laboratory.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Jeff or Hussein, where would it was Hussein?
Yeah, I have a couple of observations and questions from. I think there's one. I have one from each section. So the one thing that occurs to me with the whole discussion of the tree of Tuba is, again, he's getting into his imamology here, and it occurs to me that whenever he discusses his imamology, he's also going into virtue ethics. That for him, these two are always, they always seem paired.
Yeah.
And that doesn't become completely clear until the very end of that section where he says makarim al-akhlaq, the true inner knowledge. the Tuba refers to the sources of true inner knowledge and of virtuous traits of character. And then when I read that, it was a callback to that chapter about the straight path. So he's talking about, we can interpret him as talking about the Sophia and the cardinal virtues. But with this section, the way that he's discussing it made me think that there's some element of like receiving the virtues in this case. If we're talking about the tree of Tuba as being some kind of inspiration, something that you have to go to the lamp niche of prophecy to get this, it seems to imply that even the cardinal virtues are things that are we have to receive. And this is the way that Thomas Aquinas thought about. He had a kind of dual vision of the cardinal virtues, that there is the standard kind of Aristotelian cardinal virtues that we acquire by effort, but then there's also an infused, he called them infused counterparts to those virtues. So it just made me think about that, and I'm wondering now, does Mulla Sadra have a similarly dual understanding of the cardinal virtues, or does he really think that you have to? Yeah,
he does. He has a dual vision of this, and that can be explained from this point of view. He looks at the cardinal virtues from one angle as being transmitted in the initiatic sense, that you cannot even understand what virtue is until it is initiatically transmitted to you, and then you understand, the utility thereof. So this is why then the wilaya becomes such an important thing, because part of the process of the salik's own ascension is to realize that everything, that the reason they're clinging to the wilaya is as that initiatic, as that vehicle of initiatic transmission, such that then these virtues are being transmitted, and as they're being transmitted and enacted, then this begins to elevate the soul of the salik themselves. So that becomes a praxis in a even a almost like a Marxian sense of what that means, but from an initiatic vertical angle. So as they practice the virtues, they are elevating themselves ontologically in that process. Whereas for someone who doesn't get it from that perspective, the makarim al-akhlaq is just a very basic do unto others as they would do unto you kind of reality. But with the Gnostic wayfarer, it gains a very definite and very deep initiatic dimension and is multifaceted.
Okay, great. The other point that I had was this comes out of one of the one of the footnotes by Morris, where he's saying, when someone understands this experience of transcendence, or that everything is a tajalli, including all of the horrible things that we see, and so everything is tajalli. If we understand that at the level of unenlightened experience, in terms of the categories of unenlightened experience, as Ibn Arabi's critics were quick to recognize, it can only lead to the dangerous confusions of quietism and antinomianism.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about, like, there's always this warning surrounding, don't read Ibn Arabi unless you're ready or something like. But I mean, we all just read the Fusus together.
Yeah.
And now we're reading this, and I would think that it's been tremendously helpful in my own life in resolving all kinds of issues, intellectually, psychologically, socially. And I don't think I necessarily have that ma'rifa myself. But it seems like,
just remember what Ibn Arabi told us: everything possesses irfan. Yeah.
Well, just thinking about the purely intellectual understanding of wahdat al-wujud, like if we just read it as academics and scholars, but then we take it seriously as I just take it seriously as this is the way things are, like out of a kind of trust, and that itself, just the pure intellectual aspect of it, seems to be so actually not, to me it doesn't seem dangerous, it seems liberating.
Extremely.
As long as we're also aware that there's like a relativity in everything, it just seems to be like all good and not so dangerous.
My view on the caveats are as follows, right? Ibn Arabi or Mulla Sadra would be dangerous to a mentality living in a pre-modern Islamic society that expects a certain set of axioms to be accepted on faith, and certain behaviors to be performed without question. So someone like Ibn Arabi is not speaking to that person who hasn't, spent years either in, a system of wayfaring under a sheikh, or, in the Hausa, 20, 30 years of reading all manner of texts on fiqh and then kalam and hadith and etc. And then maybe at that point, they will be ready to then synthesize all this knowledge in the study of Ibn Arabi and Mulla Sadra. Our times, for all of its problems, has made us transcend that. We are not that subject. We're a different subject. So, in fact, the study of Mulla Sadra and Ibn Arabi is extremely empowering, precisely because of how they're, opening the whole book up, warts and all, and giving us a perspective. And because we already possess a certain critical acumen through our own intellectual development, we are in a place to better grasp what these guys are saying than someone who lived 200-300 years ago. So in my opinion, those kinds of caveats are located in a certain history. They're not relevant to us anymore. That doesn't mean that amongst certain types and psychologies, if you give them Ibn Arabi or Mulla Sadra, it might not blow their minds in a bad way. But by and large, intellectually responsible people who have some kind of intellectual, solid, sound intellectual itinerary already should, by all means, approach this stuff and engage with it. They're different. They're different subjects living at a different time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I think sometimes I forget the difference in context, like because a lot of those warnings to me seem like unnecessary and strange.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. For our time, they are unnecessary. I mean, I often fantasize, I wish I lived, during the time of Mulla Sadra. And then from my readings of that time, then it kind of reminds me, well, if you lived at the time of Mulla Sadra, and if you gravitated to Mulla Sadra or Murid Dalmat or the Sufis or whatnot, these are the sorts of things you probably would have expected, including death. If somebody didn't like you or you kind of pushed the envelope a little too much in that society. And that is why, in my opinion, people like Sadra and the Sheikh al-Akbar and very similar figures are real miracles, of that civilization itself. I mean, I look at, for example, the kind of extremes that my own Iranian people go through. 40 years ago, we went through an Islamic revolution. Now you look at the 90% of the Iranian population are irreligious, even atheists, and don't want to have to do anything with religion, and especially Islam. They excoriate it daily. And this is the kind of extreme mentality that we're dealing with. They're not trying to reach a balance, kind of harmonize these contradictions. They're just oscillating from one extreme to another. So you look at that, and then you project that into the past. It's like, well, wow, no wonder I'm not living at the time of Mulla Sadra, because then this is what the mentality and the type of person that I am would never have been able to hack it in a society like that, as much as I romanticize and all of the rest.
Yeah, I imagine that if they were living now, I'd be so curious. They'd be maybe so pleased to have the kind of freedom that we have.
And they would be open to saying a lot of things that they weren't saying. I mean, I think Ibn Arabi especially would have dispensed with a lot of the niceties of his own taqiyya, and just said things as far more openly than he did. I mean, already he's confusing people and he's being accused of contradiction, formulating the most lockjawed formulas of orthodoxy in the first sentence of a paragraph, and then spending the entire paragraph completely deconstructing what that means. And then at the very end of it, reconstructing it. Those are functions of someone trying to conceal, and they are doing taqiyya. It is very much that very thing. But today, especially if something, we had, Muhyiddin living even in Spain, his own birthplace, he would speak a lot differently, a lot more candidly, a lot more openly.
I think the traditionalists like the Guénonians and that whole lineage, they don't seem to have this kind of liberatory understanding of Ibn Arabi. My introduction to Ibn Arabi was, largely it was through William Chittick's book, that the Metaphysics of the Imagination, and like he seems to want to maintain like the literal, what Ibn Arabi literally is saying about he doesn't see it as taqiyya, it seems. He just reads it as it is.
Ibn Arabi,
just reinforces that.
William Chittick is a great scholar. I've met the man, I've spoken to the man, but William Chittick is also a Mariamiyya member. He was a member of the Shuan Nas Mariamiyya Sufi order. And he's also an academic, an ivory tower academic. So he can't be expected to walk into the skin of Ibn Arabi. As much as he knows about Ibn Arabi, and he knows a tremendous amount, and the debt that this generation and the next owes to this man is huge. But William Chittick is not Ibn Arabi. He's not in the skin of the Sheikh al-Akbar. So his assumptions are, number one, a confessional one and a professional one. So we cannot expect from William Chittick to offer a liberatory reading of Ibn Arabi. And given his adherence to neo-traditionalism in a very uncritical kind of way, then this compounds the problem. I take nothing away from William Chittick. I love the man to death. But I disagree fundamentally with some of his perspectives, and I think he's a dinosaur now. I don't, I won't invalidate what he's saying, but this is the thing, because what is required for this time is to look at Ibn Arabi as a liberatory agent. And so that means the kind of project that I'm pursuing now is trying to get Ibn Arabi to talk to Karl Marx, turning Ibn Arabi into a Marxist and Karl Marx into an Akbarian. This is what I'm about now. So that out of this comes something better, that where these ideas are not just these ivory tower or esoteric, niche esoteric circle ideas, but they themselves, these ideas become agents of liberation of human beings, so that then human beings can participate in the greater dialectic of society. So instead of talking from this point onwards about dialectical materialism, we can talk about dialectical theophanology in real time. And these ideas, gain a sort of traction that we can begin to resolve a lot of the problems that we're living in. Because let's face it, our world is crumbling. So on that level, the neo-trads are right. We're kind of in these last stages of the Kali Yuga, but the next golden age requires people who are already developing themselves or becoming ready for the next one. So we can't look at the past, nor does history work that way. History moves forward, doesn't move backwards.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving us that liberatory interpretation, because I mean, I hardly ever see it anywhere.
Well, inshallah, we're about to see a lot more of it, if I have anything to say about it.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Jeff?
Well, I don't know if I want to talk after that speech. We should just leave it there. But no, I did have I don't know how helpful this would be or how accurate, but I just had uh, a couple of conceptual correspondences occur to me when reading that material. Like with the tree of Tuba, I was thinking by the time I was done reading that section, your cosmological tree of reality for some reason occurred to me, and I wanted to make a correspondence there. So I don't know. You're nodding, so that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And also with regard to the esoteric Muhammad and Ali, as in the city of knowledge and its gate, I was thinking of that distinction you made last week between Irfan and Marifa.
Hmm.
And I don't know, that might be a bit of a stretch, but I just wanted to run that by you too, because there's got to be a difference between the city and the gate, and like an actual dynamic difference. And so that occurred to me.
But just remember, even though there's a difference, the gate is the gate of the city. So it's part of
Right,
the city.
right. But I mean, the city's kind of like it's there. It's kind of like stationary, but with the gate requires, it's almost like you have to go through it. So there's like an action required.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and yes, also I like what you were your what you were just talking about with your forthcoming dialogue between Marx and and Ibn Arabi,
Matter.
because yeah, I think that's what's needed, like just this engagement in dialogue, like enough with entertaining all these monologues and everybody in their own world. Like there's got to be some sort of meaningful coming together and meeting in the middle somewhere, and that's a good place to start. So I look forward to reading more about that.
Inshallah, you will. Inshallah.
So that's all I have.
No worries.
Thank you.
No worries at all. If nobody has anything else they want to say, unless they want to say it, do so now. We will call it quits for today. This is so the next session is going to be our final one. Obviously, that means that 16 and 17 are the final readings in the third mashriq, and then this will be the end of our reading of Mulla Sadra. So unless anybody wants to say one more thing, we'll leave it here and then meet up again next week.
Well, actually, one quick question. What about the concluding testament? We're not going to read that.
No,
I know.
we read that at the beginning, don't you remember?
No, I
the
forgot.
second session, yeah.
Okay,
But
okay.
the idea was that we will read a second time after and the end of the book when we finish it.
No. We read I purposefully got us to read the concluding testament first as an orientation about where we're
Okay.
going. So we're not going to read it again.
Yeah, I completely forgot. Sorry about that. Thank you. That's all right.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. I do that. I mean, this was based on Morris's own advice to read the concluding testament first. So I did that. We read him, and then we read the concluding testament, and then we launched into the main text from the first orientation to this last one. So it's over. We know what he says anyway in that concluding testament. So we'll leave it here for this week and then come back together next week, as always, for our very last session. Yahak.